Sony just announced the Alpha 6700. It is an APS-C camera. I was expecting this to eventually happen because they released the FX30, which is an APS-C camera. Same sensor, but video focused. I could quickly show that. FX30, if you don't know about it, video focused, $1,800 MSRP. Honestly, it's a pretty appealing camera. It does have the APS-C size sensor. Readout speeds and such are a mix on this sensor, and it is the same as the new 6700. This is the A6000. I have the two Canon APS-C cameras, so most of my videos are done in APS-C. I only have the one full-frame Z5 for photos mostly. It's pretty appealing for what it is. It has the shake reduction, bunch of video features. There are a few differences now with the 6700 that it has compared to the FX30 does not have features-wise. I think it's AI autofocus related, and then there's a feature where it can zoom in on a portion of the sensor and basically follow the person as they move around. That's currently, as far as I understand it, not on the FX30, but we'll see if it eventually gets a firmware update. So the price here without a lens is $1,400 compared to $1,800 for the FX30. Decent drop in price, but you're still getting a reasonable amount of functionality. Still has a shake reduction. The big negative to me is it has a single card slot. FX30 has the two card slots. I feel like that's a pretty big negative, at least for what I do. We'll most likely see a few models below this. The thing is, they started off kind of not great with the single card slot. I think they should have put two SD card slots in this. I'd just say they're the best with autofocus right now. Still, they've got a lot of functionality. It's pretty consistent. It's never going to be perfect, but they also have the target selection types in this camera. So different animals, human, which is nice. And it apparently works in movie mode too. One of the negatives of this camera, especially considering the price of $1,500, that it has a approximately 1 million dot LCD screen. It is fully articulating, but that's a negative in my opinion. It's nice in video situations or selfie photo type things. Although I honestly would prefer a dual function setup with the screen tilt upwards and then also flip out. There are certain screens that can do that, but apparently it doesn't darken depending on your video settings and stuff, which is good. This camera does have their larger FZ, I think 100 battery, which is nice. So similar to the A6600, basically very similar in function from that respect. It has the larger battery, single card slot, shake reduction, 120 frames a second, 4K, but there's a large crop involved in that from what I've seen. 60 frames per second, 150 megabits per second, although it doesn't have the thermal capacity of the FX30. So you have to take that into consideration with video. I don't want to comment too much on video because I don't have it to test, and clearly there are always considerations with these small cameras related to recording times. There is a setting in the Sonys where you set it to high thermal threshold or something. So you definitely want to put that on unless there's like some type of warranty reason that they put that in there. I'm not sure. Generally, if you want to get any decent length of recording times, you have to flip that setting. It does have the mechanical shutter. Pretty sure that the FX30 does not have a mechanical shutter. So for photography situations, clearly this camera is better. It does have the electronic viewfinder as well, but it's pretty small, like physically small. And it's, I think, 2.6 million dot, which again is not great resolution. 4,000th of a second mechanical, which is not amazing for a $1,500 camera. They have UVC support for the webcam functionality. That basically is a plug and play situation. So you've got the USB-C port, you plug it into your computer. Most likely it's just going to work. It's going to be seen as a webcam. It's very nice. Canon also has been adding UVC support. Basically, you don't have to install special drivers or anything. It just works. And it can be powered through USB-C. Very nice to see. But again, you'll have to set your camera to the high thermal threshold to actually use it as a webcam for a long amount of time from the video reviews I've seen in the testing so far. Viewfinder, nice to have. It's not a great one, but at the very least is in there. So the next model down will probably be the replacement for the 6400 and take out the shake reduction. Audio setup here, step down from the FX30. There's these two little microphone ports on the front of the camera. Realistically, putting any type of wind muff thing on there, you're going to get more sounds from the lens. But I mean, it's fine. It's a mic port, has a headphone port, which is nice. Although it has the small HDMI connection, which is not nice. I find it odd how Sony tries to go the small route at the sake of losing functionality that I feel like would increase their sales. I assume they're doing it for cost reasons. The one good thing about the Sony is with this larger NP-FC 100 battery, is they tend to have like the highest amount of photos, highest length of video recording time with that battery, which is nice. So the body shape is very similar to previous cameras. They did add this front dial, which is very nice. Gives you the potential to do the full exposure triangle setup in this camera. So you've got potentially aperture, shutter speed, ISO. So you've got the dial here, dial here. You could set that up, I assume, to do that. And then they have the AF on button. The big negative here is that it does not have a little joystick nub for adjusting autofocus. I would assume you could assign it to this if you want. Oh, they did move the video record button, which is very good. On the A6000 that I have, it's in this little corner over here. So there's still a button, but it's not specifically the video record button. It is good that they moved it to the top. Okay, this is nice. Oh, I can zoom in. I didn't know. You've got photo, video, and S and Q, but having a split between photo and video modes plus custom modes, assuming that you can have 6, so 3 for each type. I think that's very nice. I love that type of control layout. Action situations, I think this is going to be a decent camera, but having the single card slot, again, is a negative. Compared to the Z5 that I have, I'll go get it real quick. It's a full frame camera. This, depending on when you get it, the body was $1,000 from my case. I also got a lens with it, so it was like $1,300. It just doesn't make a ton of sense in some situations when you can get this or a similar camera for a lower price. Obviously, this camera is not great in high-speed action situations. You're saying unless the other one uses cheaper lenses. Maybe. Z-mount is actually opening up. So there are third parties in Z-mount. Not as many, obviously, but there are definitely more coming out. I can look at that in a bit. It's an action super good autofocus situation. I would probably go with the Sony. Not this, honestly, not this one because of the single card slot, but I can see it as an option at the very least for people that don't care about that feature. Face detect, again, not perfect, but I've had very consistent results with this camera when I set it up properly. Basically, the autofocus of this, I've got the Z5 in this very close, and no one's ever complained about the focus system in this, as far as I know. That's a M6 Mark II from Canon. Oh, once it drops to $700, I don't know if it's ever going to do that. What's going to happen is that they're going to release lower end models. So the 6400 replacement, but it might be like 65 or something. I'm surprised they gave it 6700 numbering. Any lower ends with this sensor, they're probably going to be a nice option. I just think the pricing on this one's a little off. Oh, and the Hot Shoe does have the full functionality. So you can put Sony's special microphones and stuff on it. Gerald Undone, he's a YouTuber. He mentioned this, and I've mentioned it in the past. I'm not a fan of these type of strap lugs. You have to use these little triangles that come with the camera. They make noise, and they're not great for video. So it is kind of sad that they use those ones instead of well, actually the A6000 has the same ones. The Z5 has that too. I'm just not a fan of this because they just not great. This one, however, has the like built-in holes. I wish they were wider, but these ones are pretty decent. Let's see if they mention anything that I didn't cover. So 11 frames a second shooting with mechanical or electronic. That's a little lower than I would have thought, but I mean, it's fast, but it's not as fast as other cameras I've seen. 4K up to 60 frames a second, from a 6K capture. Yeah, 4K 120 is 1.58x crop. 10-bit video. Okay, that's big for the video people. So they, at the very least, let you get 10-bit. It's nice that DP Review is basically back, but they were purchased by this Gear Patrol company. I pretty much mentioned the same exact thing. Front dial, updated processor, video setup, LUTs. So you can use lookup tables for video. That's nice. I've never gotten into that. They've got a little comparison here. X-T5 from Fujifilm, this older 6600. So that started at the same price. Okay, interesting. And then 15 millisecond, depending. This depends on which setting you're using for the video, but definitely better than this. So this 24 megapixel jello sensor, but I mean, I'm using 1080p with this and it's fine. Whoops. That does so much better with that same battery. So this newer camera must be doing a lot more processing. Viewfinder again. This resolution was popular back in the old computer days of monitors and stuff. I used that for a long time on my CRT, I think. Or this person said they noticed some circumstances the camera can take something like half a second to identify what it should track. So they did notice some quirks here. So petapixel, they used to be with DP Review, but they left when Amazon got rid of them. Easy to carry around, pretty compact. And pretty much covering the same stuff. They mentioned the ZV-E1. Hopefully they update the E10 with the new sensor. That would be very nice. You know, this E1 is the full frame video focused camera. This is very, very vlog focused, lower recording times because there isn't a bunch of thermal capacity and such that it can handle for video, which is a weird mix in my opinion. I could see a lot of usefulness for this camera, again, for vlogging stuff, but like what I'm doing here, I don't know how it would fare based on at least the tests that I've seen. Again, I haven't used it, so just what I've heard type of thing. In that case, when you hit this price point, I'd probably go with this Panasonic that he's showing right here. So they also announced this 70-200 f4G OSS2 lens. Let's see how much this costs. $1,700. These used to be around $1,300 for this type of lens. Looks like a new microphone. It's very unusual looking. More than 1,000 JPEGs or 59 compressed RAW files. That's not too bad. 11 frames a second, 59 RAWs. Get you like 5 seconds probably. This will probably be the only APS-C photo-focus camera for Sony to have the stabilizer in there. So if you want that feature, you're probably going to have to fork the money out to get this thing. Or you could just buy the old A6600, but you won't get all this nice new stuff. So right off the bat, let's take a look at the Sony lenses and see kind of what you can get on the lower end. So Yongnuo 50mm f1.8s. $130 Sony E-mount. Obviously, they haven't tried any of these, so it really depends. TC Artisan coming out with autofocus lenses now. 27 2.8. That'd be pretty decent on APS-C, like focal length wise. 50 1.8. I have used this lens. I was not a fan. 24 2.8 FE. So you could potentially buy some full frame lenses and use them on a full frame camera if you ever decide to switch from this 6700. 24 2.8, 85 1.8, 24. So a good range of companies and options here. 35, 16. This is an old classic. I don't think it's amazing optically. 33.5 macro, $250. It looks like there are a decent-ish amount of somewhat lower cost options. 22.8, 35, 56 Viltrox. I've used the Canon EFM version of this. It's okay. Same thing for this and that. So 3323 or Yongnuo. Rokinon 45 1.8. That's a little different. This is the lens that I'm actually using right now with this A6000. Now we're finally getting a little bit of telephoto stuff. 55 to 210 with not great aperture range. 12mm f2. That's kind of cool. Pretty interesting. 35 1.8 OSS. That's kind of cool. Optical stabilization in a 35. The Canon 32 does not have optical stabilization. It's $500. That could be interesting on the 6700 or on this one too. This is a very compact Sigma 18 to 50. I wish it were wider, but it has the constant maximum of f2.8 aperture, which is nice. 18 to 105 f4. Kind of cool. That might be potentially interesting on the 6700. Clearly, Sony E-mount has a lot of options here. 70, 50, 1.4, 35, 17, 18 to 300. So that's a big all-rounder type thing. 35, 90, 2.8, 24, 10 to 20. This is a newer one, I think, f4 with the PZ. So it's got the this type of electronic zoom thing. I think this, yeah, it's APS-C. Not cheap. Does not have optical stabilization, which is pretty disappointing in my opinion. I really think they should have gotten that optical stabilization in this thing, because the previous lens that it's trying to replace does have optical stabilization. Okay, I think that's good enough. Clearly they have a lot of options. I'm going to quickly go over Z-mount. It's cheaper than this Sony A6700. Has dual card slots. It has a lot of functionality. Again, it's not high-speed photography focused, but you're getting a full-frame sensor and more photography-esque stuff. This viewfinder is very nice for what it is. It's 3-point-something million dot. It looks good optically. It's large. Very nice viewfinder in my opinion, especially for the price. It has the functionality of different modes and things, like custom modes on the dial, which is very convenient. Yeah, obviously it is a newer mount, so you're not going to have as many options, but it seems like they're starting to open up more, which is good. So we've got Z-mount selected, autofocus. That should be good there. I have it priced low to high, same situation. We've got the 32mm f2.8 for Nikon. That was on the Sonys as well. This is full frame capable. Again, TT Artisan with autofocus. Another TT Artisan 27 2.8. Make. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. 85 from this company. F1.8 with autofocus for $200. That seems like a good deal. But clearly the reviews are not stellar on here. 24 1.7 from Nikon. This is DX, which basically means APS-C. Yeah, so that's an option. I have this lens, 28 2.8. I'm not amazingly thrilled with it from an optical quality standpoint, but it's been consistent. I've used it at multiple conventions, just taking snapshot type hallway cosplay photos. Works well enough. 40 f2. From what I've seen, this is better optically than the 28, but on an APS-C setup, you'd have to take that into consideration. However, if you were to, you just want some type of camera for a decent price, Z5. We've got the 33 Viltrox APS-C lenses on here as well, which is 33, 56, and 23. I've used those for EFM. They're fine. Got the DX kit lens 16, which is nice. It starts at 16. This is a relatively new 12 to 28 for APS-C type cameras. And it has this type of zoom, electronic zoom. 51.8 from Yongnuo, 50 to 250 APS-C DX. They're really starting to get more options here. 51.8 from Viltrox. Is that full frame? Yeah, it's full frame capable, but the reviews are not great on here. 35 full frame, 85 1.8. It's probably full frame, yeah. Here's the lens that I have that I've been mentioning, the 24 to 50 kit lens for full frame cameras. I would not pay that much for it, but it's okay. Then we get to the Sigma. They did announce and have started to this is the wrong picture because the mount gets much wider on the actual lens. Kind of like how this Leica one flares on the bottom. The Nikon one flares even more. Wide girth mount. So you got the 30, I assume the 56 and the 16. 30 optically is the worst of the three. Again, I haven't used this one, but I like Sigma lenses. 13 1.4. Okay, this is APS-C. That's kind of interesting. 26 2.8. This is a weird one from Nikon. I wish they would have combined this with the 28 to get one really good lens instead of separating them like this so they could make this weirdo. It does have a metal mount. It's very thin, but it does extend the inner barrel when you focus, moves around. On the 28, it doesn't do that, which is something I prefer. Clearly the price is not amazing, but this one optically is better. So it's just a weird mix of the two different lenses. And I think the price is a little bit higher in the Sigma 4 Z mount, which is a consideration. It's $400, so it's $100 difference. A lot of the Nikon stuff does not have optical stabilization, so that's a consideration as well. The Z5 does have the sensor-based stabilization, but as far as I remember, none of the Z5 APS-C cameras have the sensor stabilizer. Sony clearly has the edge on lenses, but I think Z5 is an interesting alternative if you don't need the speed. You want full frame. You want to actually save a little bit on the body price depending on sales and such. Clearly it's an older camera, but I'm not thrilled with Sony's pricing these days. Maybe they've always been that way, I just haven't paid attention, but it just seems to have a premium on it, and I'm not sure is it just a viable premium. It really depends on your preferences and your needs and such. If you really want one of the better autofocus systems but don't care about the card slot, want the tilting screen, want some type of viewfinder but don't care about the quality and the usability of it as much as it just being there, don't care about the autofocus joystick. Again, this one does have that. Maybe you want something as small as possible, APS-C. So you've got it side by side with the Fujifilm. There's a bunch of options in Fujifilm too, of course. And they're more equivalent to this camera than the one I've been showing. XT5, this is the XS20, I believe. Yeah, it looks like it. So that's a little bit smaller, actually. I think this has a single card slot as well, but it looks like a bunch of similar functionality. So it's $100 cheaper than the Sony. Does this have sensor-based? Okay, it does. So you're getting very similar setup. Viewfinder, although optically it might be better. I'd have to look into that. That add-on for the video stuff, basically a fan. You connect to it. Kind of cool. I mean, it's nice that they give you the option. So this is basically like their main competition, this XS20, and it's cheaper. And Fujifilm clearly has a lot of lens options, first-party ones. I'm not sure on the pricing and such. I think they've been opening up more to third parties as well, which is nice. Yeah, so that's certainly an alternative. I don't know why it has these reviews. Anyways, it looks like a decent camera. Again, the pricing doesn't seem right to me, but I'm sure people will be pretty interested in it. It is a clear upgrade from the 6600, which is nice to see. I just wish they would have added the dual card slots, maybe tried to make the viewfinder better. But besides that, it's nice. It did at least add some additional things like the dial and, of course, all of the autofocus improvements, the better sensor, things like that. Let's look at the A6700. My personal opinion. It's got a photography Banzai. See ya.